Welcome, everybody. We will begin shortly. Welcome, everybody who has joined. We will begin very soon. Welcome, everybody. We will begin shortly. Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2021 AILA Annual Virtual Conference. We are pleased to present this session titled U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS Open Forum. My name is JJ Area, one of AILA's education program managers, and it is my pleasure to be your session moderator. I would like to formally welcome the participants who are joining us today. Please note that today's session is being recorded, and it will be available as an on-demand recording on the virtual site within 24 hours. To submit questions, go back to the virtual site window where you entered the session, and then click on the discussion chat button located below the session description. All conference handouts and materials are available in your AILA Agora digital library. If you will be seeking CLE credit for your participation, a 4-digit attendance verification code will be provided at the conclusion of the session. Please see the CLE info tab on the virtual site for instructions on how to enter your credits on WebCLE. Please note, CLE credits not reported on WebCLE by the published deadline will be subject to an administrative late fee. If you would like to turn off the subtitles, press the live transcript button located on the bottom right of your screen and select Hide Subtitle, which will disable the live transcript. At this time, I'd like to turn the session over to discussion leader Bennett Savitz, AILA USCIS HQ Benefits Policy Committee Chair from Boston, Massachusetts, to introduce today's speakers. Please go ahead, Bennett.
Thank you, JJ, and welcome everybody. I'm very happy to have you with us for this USCIS Open Forum. This is my last act as outgoing USCIS HQ Chair, and so I want to start off by also thanking my outgoing USCIS Vice Chair, who helped me do everything that I've done over the past 3 years. And so we're very pleased to have this be our last act together as chair and vice chair, because this is a nice closing loop from when I first started doing this back in 2017. The Open Forum was a very different experience for those of you who attended. And so it is very nice, and we're very grateful to have USCIS to be with us today to participate in this Open Forum. So first of all, I would like to thank and introduce 3 of our USCIS speakers who were gracious enough to already join us at the spring conference we just had a couple of months ago. And that is Connie Nolan, Acting Associate Director, Service Center Operations Directorate, Carrie Selby, Acting Associate Director, External Affairs Directorate, and Michael Valverde, Acting Associate Director, Field Operations Directorate. They will be participating with us momentarily as we get to discussion topics and questions. But before we do that, I would like to thank and welcome Felicia Escobar Carrillo, Chief of Staff, Office of the Director, who is going to start us off with some opening remarks. Thank you. You are muted.
You're muted.
Sorry.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Bennett, and thank you all for joining us today at the virtual conference, AILA's virtual annual conference. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I think I speak for my colleagues in saying that, we're really excited to join you all. We know how important AILA is in the immigration stakeholder community, and the vital role that you play in highlighting issues and concerns. And so, really appreciate being able to talk to you all today. I would raise as an example at the top, an issue that you all flagged for us in a letter recently was concerns over the rejection of immigration benefits applications and petitions by USCIS during this COVID time. In response, we just today actually announced that we are for a time limited period, having some flexibilities in filing to provide relief to those applicants and petitioners who were affected by the lockbox delays that we were encountering earlier in this fiscal year and last year as well. So I wanted to just acknowledge that as one thing that we're because of AILA's attention to these issues and our ability to communicate back and forth with you, we were able to address. This isn't my first AILA conference. I don't think it is for many folks, including our folks that joined you in the spring, at your spring gathering. But really, I'd say I'm really glad to join you all as the USCIS Chief of Staff. In my previous roles at the White House and as a Senate staffer and NGO advocate, I always valued these gatherings of AILA attorneys. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, they're really going to talk about the meat of the work happening right now, because they're the ones helping us implement this administration's priorities. I wanted to just give you a few opening remarks just in terms of the top lines around our priorities as the Biden-Harris administration. Really, since January, we have been working every day to operationalize and execute on the new policy priorities of this administration. These priorities are expressed in several executive orders, proclamations, and policy directives that have come from the president as well as the secretary. And those 4 areas I just would highlight are, the idea of promoting full and fair access to our legal immigration system, the importance of acknowledging the contributions immigrants make to our country, to our society, fully embracing our humanitarian responsibilities as a nation, and encouraging those who are eligible to take advantage of the benefits of citizenship. We have made a significant number of policy and operational changes in fulfillment of those priorities, and I'm excited to highlight a few of them, additional ones today. So first, in the area impacted by the Executive Order 14012, the Restoring Faith in Our Legal Immigration Systems and Strengthening Integration and Inclusion Efforts for New Americans, Executive Order, a mouthful. We've done a number of things in the naturalization front. For one of the first things we did was we reinstituted the 2008 civics test. We had heard feedback from folks that the 2020 test that had just been instituted that was creating challenges. So we did go back to the more time-tested 2008 civics test. We're continuing to move forward with our grants program for citizenship and integration, and we'll, by the fall, be able to make some announcements around the $10 million in grants we're able to provide to promote naturalization and civic integration. And we're also very much engaging people to make sure they know about the grants program and know how to apply, and also giving people 60 days to apply. I know in the past few years, people have had very limited time to apply. And despite still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, as we all are, our field offices are making incredible strides in the naturalization processing work that they do with the help of technology. So we are using video interviews, and Michael, I'm sure, can talk more about this, where an applicant will come into a facility. They will go to one office. You may have accompanied some of your clients in this with this new process. They go into one office, and then there's an adjudicating officer, an interviewing officer, and in another office, and able to move the naturalization interviewing process along. In the last couple of months, so in March and April, we actually processed over 180,000 naturalization applications with the help of this technology, which really brought us back up to pre-pandemic levels when it comes to naturalization applications. And that really is no small feat given everything that we're dealing with in terms of restrictions. On the policy front, we've issued several new policy manual updates related to continuous residence for certain religious workers who are outside the country, some things related to veterans who have served honorably and still want to apply and naturalize, but they're living outside the US. And that involves USCIS coordinating with CBP and ICE sometimes to facilitate, or CBP, I should say, to facilitate someone's admission or parole, or to sometimes also do interviews outside of the US or in a port of entry. And then lastly, we've done some work around clarifying that we're not going to penalize applicants who unknowingly or willfully registered to vote, perhaps through some kind of motor voter voter registration process at the DMV. So those are that's a little bit of the work we've been doing on the naturalization front, and there is definitely more to come. We're a part of the interagency working group for naturalization that we're actually leading that work across the federal government to think about a whole of government approach to promoting naturalization. On the humanitarian front, we've published several notices in the Federal Register related to DED and TPS for Venezuela, Syria, and Burma. And most recently, the Secretary made an announcement related to TPS for Haiti and a designation related to that. So very soon to come, there will be a Federal Register notice implementing that implementing the designation. And then I would also say that we're thinking about how to use video facilitated interviews in the refugee context as well. Right now, we've completed about 7,800 affirmative asylum case interviews using video, the video facilitated process. And I think there will be more to come in that space as well as it relates to refugee processing, as we're trying to get our refugee numbers back up to what they have been in the past. We're on the humanitarian front, our folks are also very busy working with across the department on the Family Unification Task Force executive order and implementing that executive order to make sure that we're reuniting families that were separated under the last administration's zero tolerance policy. And actually in the last few weeks, a few days, dozens of those applications for parole have been approved, and people are starting to come into the country and getting reunited, as you may have seen in media accounts. And we're also working to, in the first phase of reinstituting the CAM program, and also thinking about how we can support over the last few months the Office of Refugee Resettlement and their efforts in the border related to processing unaccompanied children. In the area of breaking down barriers, as you all know, and because you submitted a robust comment to us, there was a recent call, and I think the Secretary mentioned this today in his comments this morning, a call for public input on how to identify barriers across USCIS benefits and services. And that just closed a few weeks ago, and we received 7,400 comments approximately that we are very busily combing through. We were excited by the breadth and the depth of those comments. I think some of those things, some of the comments actually underscored some things we were already thinking about, but I'm confident there will be other ideas that are that surface in those comments that we will need to think through, and we look forward to continuing to have a discussion with you about those issues. In terms of things that we're already working on, there's work that we're doing around the online filing and e-filing, particularly related to the employment-based portfolio. And this is something that I know that folks will be able to talk to you a little bit about as well. We're also very much thinking about our fee rule. We will need to publish. We do intend to publish an NPRM that will provide more details related to the needs to adjust our fees, which, as you know, have not been adjusted in several years. But we look forward to a robust public comment period and review of the comments that come in when we're ready to do that, to release the fee rule, the NPRM, which we think will be by the end of the year. In terms of the COVID situation and how we're working to address processing delays, I've been really impressed by all the work and creativity and ingenuity since I got here in early February that USCIS has been deploying to think about how we address our current situation with COVID. We're obviously not out of the woods yet, but we're getting there. And we know that the COVID restrictions, postal service volumes, and other external factors have greatly exacerbated processing delays and backlogs, and have placed burdens on people who really need those benefits to be adjudicated. And you all serve as the important advocates for your clients in this process. So, I want you to know we're really committed to addressing these delays in swift and creative ways. We appreciate calls for policy changes to help reduce inefficiencies while also ensuring the need for proper adjudications. USCIS has taken a number of important steps to address the COVID-related delays, and also, these things really also help us fulfill our obligations under the executive orders. So recent things that have been done, we've expanded operations and staffing at lockbox facilities to nearly 24 hours per day. We've extended hours at certain high traffic application support centers across the country from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And very soon, hopefully later this month or early next, we expect our ASCs to begin scheduling at 100% capacity. This increase will allow USCIS to be back to normal pre-COVID scheduling, hopefully by the end of the summer. And so we're excited to see that happening, and appreciate the hard work of our IRIS team and others who've helped make that a reality. We've also implemented a biometrics reuse strategy that has led to the reuse of nearly 1.75 million biometrics of applicants since March 2020. And that's helped reduce our biometric scheduling queue by 33%. And you may have also seen that we're exempting certain biometrics requirements for H4s, L2s, and E non-immigrants who are submitting their I-539, and that's also one of the prongs of our strategy to reduce processing delays. I would also say that we also announced that we're going to be doing things related to the flexibilities for people to file their lockbox, to refile their applications because of lockbox delays. So I think that's really important to underscore, as I mentioned at the top. And these flexibilities will only apply to applicants and petitioners and petitions received between October 1st, 2020 and April 1, 2021, and will be in effect until August 9th, 2021. And you can look to our website for additional details for this information. I'm also excited to announce some policy changes that came out yesterday, just if you haven't had a chance to see them because you've been busy at the AILA conference. There were 3 things that we moved forward yesterday. One was a return to the RFE and NOID policies from 2013, the previous guidance that was in place that allows officers to issue RFEs and NOIDs when additional evidence could potentially demonstrate someone's eligibility for an immigration benefit. We've heard that when these applications were denied, sometimes people would, because of innocent mistakes, people would have to refile or reopen, and that caused issues and challenges for the benefits that those individuals are seeking, but also created more work for us. And so it's a win-win to do something like this from our perspective. Another win-win from our perspective is the extension of the 1-year validity period for certain EADs from 1 year to 2 year for folks who are adjusting status. We think that this is important because it allows people to have more certainty while they're waiting for their adjustment applications to move forward, and frees up resources to focus on those adjudications rather than an extension of an EAD. While someone's underlying benefit is still being processed. And then finally, I would say that we're thinking about expedited processing, and we know that this is important sometimes. There are things that come up, emergencies that come up, other challenges that people are facing, and so we've made some changes to the process and the criteria for how people can utilize the expedited processing process, and so these all will be going into effect, and we're looking forward to seeing how they play out, and to continue to get your feedback about how we work to improve all of our processes. And so I really want to turn it over to my colleagues who will be able to go much more in the weeds with you and share some of the great work that's happening at the agency and things that we are hoping to come down the line very soon. And really just thank you so much to our moderators, to Bennett and Suzanne. Thanks for your work as leaders amongst AILA. As you said, I think this is your last official duty in your current roles. Thank you for that. We look forward to having a strong relationship with your colleagues that will be taking on these roles in the coming year. And I know we look forward to the dialogue right now. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. That's a lot of very, very helpful information for everybody to absorb. I want to highlight a couple things. One is the appreciation of the ability to communicate those issues to you, but more importantly and more refreshingly, the ability to get responses to those communications that we are sending up to USCIS, and we certainly do appreciate that as well. And the responsiveness, in addition to that, that you highlight a few of these things that have already changed, and that therefore, as you'll see as we talk about some of these issues, already are in effect in a positive way, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But the idea here is I just want to let everybody know what we're doing. So we're already getting a lot of questions in the chat, and so I want to make sure people understand that this is an agenda that we submitted to USCIS previously before this meeting. So any Q&A that you have, hopefully a lot of those questions that you're asking will be part of what we're going to go through on the agenda. We're going to get through as much of it as we can. And as already Felicia has graciously said, hopefully that conversation will continue with everything that we don't get through today. So any questions that you have that aren't covered today, the incoming chair and vice chair of this committee are collecting all of that information, and that will certainly inform them for future engagements and things. So, so the idea here is that everything that we're about to discuss comes from the document that was referred to in Felicia's opening remarks, which is that request for information on the removing barriers. And so that's AILA document 210-52032, 210-52032, which was AILA's 20-page response to that request for information. And we certainly thank USCIS for the opportunity to give that input. And so what we're about to go through now are the most important issues in order from that document, and get to as much of it as we can. So what we're going to start with, not surprisingly then to anybody, is that the number one issue is backlog reduction. Fortunately, this issue was already addressed in Secretary Mayorkas's keynote today, as well as in the Senate confirmation hearing for incoming USCIS Director Urjadu. So obviously everybody knows what a big deal this is and what a big issue this is. In the response to the RFI, the recommendation from AILA was to create a backlog reduction unit. But so what I really want to do is just be able to open it up and get input from anybody of our USCIS speakers who wants to talk about the backlog reduction plan.
So, excuse me, I'll start off first. One of the questions that had come to us was, reliable expectations of processing. And we all are no stranger to the perfect storm that we've been experiencing. Even as seasoned leaders who've been through a lot, still never anticipated everything that we had happen over the last year. With biometric scheduling issues and COVID and financial peril, with at least 2 potential furloughs, not to mention some increased receipting when there were certain policies that were going to be coming out, or fee rules, and certain filing trends just for administrative expectations as the previous administration. So, this is not going to be a quick fix. So leveling, people's expectations that this is really a multi-year plan. And we do have certain things that are in process, like the 4103 that is going to be going to Congress soon, which lays out how to update our infrastructure, how to update things and make them digital. I know that's a huge concern for everyone in this day and age, and we understand. There's a lot of us who have been around for quite a few years, and unfortunately, we're still dealing with a lot of paper. And with all these pressures in COVID, paper transfers still have to happen. And so, one of the questions was about creating a backlog reduction unit. And I wish it was that simple. I wish it was that simple to just say there's one unit that can wave magic wands and just get all the backlog done. But that's truly not the case. And so what we're looking at from all of the directorates, and Michael will speak to you on this, but around the Service Center Operations Directorate really is, how do we have that holistic look over all the form types, over all of the backlog? And I'll be honest with you, every person we talk to, which we're talking now again, which I appreciate, has a different agenda, has a different human impact. And that's the one thing that I just want to make sure that everybody realizes as we talk about this backlog reduction, and we talk about all of these cases, these are lives, these are people, and everybody has a vested interest in making sure that these people's lives can go about again, and that they're not feeling this impact. But us in these directives, we have millions and millions of cases, and we have to try to figure out how do we have spread those resources across to make sure that we're taking care of the farmers, and we're taking care of the religious workers, and we're taking care of the businessmen, and we're taking care of those families who are trying to reunite, and we're trying to take care of those students who are trying to go to school and have a job. So really, we're trying to do that from a holistic approach. And the best that we can do is we throw all of our resources that we can, and we try to find efficiencies. And so what we've been very diligent at is trying to find those cases that are log jammed, those ones that are really aging, that have the real big impacts, while still trying to keep up with the stuff that's coming in quickly for expedites and premium processing, but also looking at those cases where we can find electronic processing, whether that can be the 765 students that we've done with the e-filing, or whether it can be reusing biometrics. So if we have a bunch of cases that have been sitting and waiting for biometrics, with us waiving that requirement now, we're able to take a large workload and now infuse it, and really try to hit several different functions at the same time. I just really, again, want to reiterate that while we're looking at all of these potential efficiencies and these electronic ways, it is not quick. And just know that we're really trying to find those most complex and just aging cases and everything, and try to pull them to the front, try to really get those taken care of, because we understand the impact that it's had over the last year. And I don't know, Michael, if you want to talk a little bit more about what you're doing from an efficiency standard to try to increase that processing, or leverage technology to really move things along.
Yeah. No, thanks, Connie. And it's great to be back. Hopefully next time in person, meeting with you all and sharing ideas. I think, half of the benefit of these conversations is the panel, and then the other half is the hallway afterwards, where we all make a run for it, but then it takes us about 40 minutes to get 20 feet. But we learn a lot, and that's a major source of feedback that we just haven't had. So, but I will probably say a lot of the same things with maybe kind of different words that Connie said. For us in field operations, we generally try to work on a first in, first out. So, we are always trying to tackle, the cases at the end of the queue, right? So that's the backlog team. It is hard to, to just answer the question, right? It's hard to envision having a backlog team that's separate and apart from what we're doing. Rather, we would augment our resources, but like Connie, it's not just about resources. With more people, we can do more work, certainly. But we know that there are process and technology and policy choices that we can make to move the work faster. And that is, frankly, that's what we were doing, 10 years ago and 5 years ago. And that's how we see our job, really, as a headquarters team. We try to give the field what they need to get the work done that they have, and then to think about how they can do it better in the next month or year or whatever. And so to brag a little bit, our hour per case times have been going down a little bit. Certainly not as much as we'd like. And our processing queues have been going down, again, not as much as we like over the past, the queue has started going down this calendar year. But I recognize that our processing queue for N400s for adjustment of status is way larger than we'd like it. And so we brag, but we know that the challenge is massive, and we're happy that we're making progress on it. And I thank Felicia for her kind highlight there. But we know we have a lot more progress that we need to make before we're happy at the place that we are. So I guess that's a long way of saying the backlog, or the pending level of work, is the single metric that we look at, right? It drives everything that we do. We have metrics beyond that too, like Connie said, to make sure for those cases that fall behind, we keep our eyes on those, and we ensure that our field managers are aware that we're looking at those, and it's not just how much work you do, but it's getting the work from the end of the queue and the oldest work done, because as Connie said, people are waiting for those answers. It's not an academic exercise. So I'll just finish in about 2 more seconds to say, absolutely, we rely on technology and process, and happy to talk in further in different questions about what exactly that is. We've seen a lot of great gains from the AILA tool, and you'll see more and more that our work in adjustment of status is going to soon be going to AILA at a exclusive rate. So we're excited for that, because we see once we learn how to use the tool, not only do we get faster on a case-by-case method, but we also have many more doors we can open process-wise to learn about our work, to learn about how we can do it better. So technology is really helpful. And then the other thing that we sort of define as our role and we acknowledge is that in some parts of the country, the processing queue isn't an issue. And in other parts of the country, it's a massive issue. And we're reminded of that every 4 years. But, I like to remind the staff and critical members of Congress that we make, potential new voters every day. And it's our job to do that. But we acknowledge, we stipulate for the court that there are some cities and states where the processing times are here, and then others where they're there. But why I raise that is to say that the video technology that we're stepping into now is really going to let us attack that disparity. And it's my goal, and I've challenged the teams, so they'll hold me accountable. You all can hold me accountable, that the complaints that we get every 4 years about, oh my God, if I apply in X city, I'm never going to be able to get my citizenship and I'm register and vote in that election. But if I apply in Y city, I can practically do it in August and still vote in November. It's our goal to say that is we're going to stop seeing that. We're going to see less of it next year, less of it the year after that, and hopefully as we go through, we'll have a nationwide set of expectations that the people that you assist can have, and you can tell them, irrespective of where you're having that conversation, it is reasonable to get your green card or to get your naturalization accomplished in X months. And I'll stop there, because I think I could talk about that for a while, but we've got a healthy agenda.
Great. Carrie, did you want to say something too about this?
I'm just going to say something very, very quickly, just making sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I do know you want to move on. I just wanted to kind of put a pitch in there. So when Michael and Connie were talking about efficiencies, and since, so I'm Carrie Selby from External Affairs, and since my USCIS program resides in External Affairs, I just wanted to say, absolutely, we are looking for efficiencies every day. And one of the main ways we find efficiencies is by online filing. But what I wanted to just make sure everyone understands is, it's not just about making a case electronic. It's about the whole it's about the whole picture of it, because what we do by online filing is we build efficiencies for our customers, right? We make things easier for our customers to file. We provide them with information. We give them cues about if they're missing information, and that just makes them more efficient in their filing process, and it helps us on the back end as we work to adjudicate their case. So that is something, excuse me, I'm fighting a little cold here, I apologize. Connie mentioned the 765 students, and we have found by making some of those classifications online filed, we've found a number of efficiencies. And what that does also is it reduces inquiries to the contact centers. I know we're going to talk about that a little later, but where I'm going with it is it gives the officers, the immigration services officers, to spend more time adjudicating, and it helps to start us pecking away at the backlog situation. So it's sort of more of a holistic picture. And I appreciated this morning when I heard the secretary say the quote from John Wooden, as a basketball fan, be quick, but don't hurry. I love that as a former basketball player myself. We do recognize that we need to be quick about things, but we don't want to do it in haste. So I'll stop there, Bennett. I know you want to move on, but I just wanted to add that in. We're really excited about the direction we're going with online filing.
I would just say one thing. I'm sorry, I know you want to move on, but it's such an important topic, and it definitely came up in Ward's hearing, her confirmation hearing, and I am for our hopeful potential new director. And so I think she's going to want to, in the way Connie mentioned, think about this in a very holistic way, and how we can tackle the backlog issues. And as Michael mentioned, thinking about the different tools that we have to use, whether it's technology or if it new policies and new procedures. There's definitely from all I've heard from her, there will be focus on this.
Thank you. Yes, and obviously, yeah, we spent as much time as we did on this because this is the #1 topic, the #1 issue. That's why it was first. So, so now we'll move on. And I should have mentioned that this first section of questions and topics all relates to creating reasonable and reliable expectations with processing. So I will go through these, and then Suzanne will have a different section after that. So the next issue after backlog reduction, which kind of goes hand in hand, of course, is then processing times. And so one of the other comments in the removing barriers document is devising a method to recalculate and disseminate processing times. It is very difficult to understand sometimes from the USCIS processing times website how long it's actually taking to process applications and petitions, and the ranges provided are wide, and so there's no realistic way for us to understand how and when we can make an inquiry, how long it's supposed to take, and this lack of transparency in posted processing times gives us no ability to know what a normal processing time is to make that inquiry. So we were wondering what your thoughts are on revising this method for calculating processing windows. And of course, there was a recommendation in the Case Backlog and Transparency Act of 2020 that was referenced in the barriers document.
Yeah, so thanks, Bennett. I'm going to take this one because we've, certainly, thank you. We recognize that, we do have some work to do in terms of, updating and making very transparent processing times. I'll very quickly just kind of give you a little history. I'm sure everyone knows this, but back, I think it was in like the spring of 2018, we USCIS introduced a new methodology to display our processing times. And I think that's what you're all referring to. We, back then we started with, I think it was 4 forms, and what we did is we moved from what we call like a single data point that basically showed an average based on all pending cases and cycle times. And we moved to what we call a completion-based model that displays a range. And I know it's this range that we are giving some thought to as well. So this range that's displayed is what we call, it's like the 50th percentile at the low end, and the high end of the range is the 93rd percentile. So while I know I'll say we welcome your scrutiny on this, because your scrutiny just makes us better. So be thinking through this conversation about additional things you want to share with us here. But we believe this range, greater reflects what I would call the natural variation in a case processing time versus a single data point. We have continued to add new forms to this new methodology. I think, in July, I think we're going to hit our 17th form that we're adding in here. And so certainly we want to be consistent there. What I would say for all of you is applicants for all form types can inquire about their case if it's pending longer than the high end of the range. Now I say that, so there's sort of your point in time. You can inquire about outside normal processing time once it's past that high end of the range. I also recognize that the range is very broad, and sometimes it's very confusing and hard for individuals to understand when they look at something and they see that there's, I'm just going to make this up, but probably fairly accurate, a 7-month to 48-month, I'm being a little exaggerating, but maybe not in one form type, processing time. So, and I see Suzanne shaking her head. So we recognize that range is difficult. And so we are, what I want to say to all of you is this is something that we're looking into. Some of the planned changes with the methodology that we also want to include are including like the subtypes, the form subtypes as a drop-down menu for processing. So again, right, like we recognize that there's a lot of subcategories with forms like 765s. So kind of like what I said earlier, as we continue to make improvements, we really want to educate and inform our customers. That makes things easier for them. If we can provide that information up front, that's certainly more helpful for you. So not a real specific answer to your question, Bennett, but what I want people to understand is we recognize that we have more work to do here with processing times. We have come a long way since this single kind of data point in time, but we recognize we do need to make the ranges a little more accurate and provide that more definitive information to our customers. So I'll stop there unless any of my colleagues would like to add anything. Thank you.
So thank you, that's helpful. And I appreciate the ability and willingness to look into this further, because as we acknowledge that it's going to be a while before these backlogs get reduced, the important thing is to be able to identify these cases that are stuck, that shouldn't be stuck, because it helps not only the people who are filing the cases, but it helps you clear out the backlog as well. So, so the more specificity and transparency we can get to, I think the better it will be for everyone. So thank you. So then that brings us to the next thing, which has been an issue that I've brought up since even before I was on this committee as a chair and vice chair, but back in the day when USCIS started going to website addresses of where to send things and changing from time to time where to send different things, and then adding on to a website that you had to scroll through, in some cases, multiple pages to try to figure it out. So the issue becomes providing clear and advanced instructions on filing addresses and reinstating the policy that was in place back then to transfer misfiled petitions and prohibit rejections for non-substantive issues, such as not being able to necessarily identify on the website where this case should have been sent today as opposed to yesterday. And so, as I've mentioned, that confusion, which I often like to joke, I don't practice immigration law, I practice overnight mail law, because I have to, every time I'm going to send something in, go to a website and spend several minutes with my staff trying to scroll through various pages. And so what we'd love to get some feedback from you on our efforts to clarify where and how to file these things, and hopefully some more leniency on letting people know with more time up front of those changes when they're going to occur, and giving a little more leniency when people might make an understandable mistake.
So I'll start, and anybody else is free to join in. So appreciate you bringing up the instructions issues, and we know that in order to move resources and to be able to provide certain capacity, we do have to move workloads, and we're really trying to get away from that. But we're also looking at making sure that those filing instructions are more accurate, and that we have a uniform look on the web pages, as Carrie said, trying to add more drop downs, trying to avoid additional scrolling. So we are looking at redesigning those web pages and have a consistency in how we display them. Again, we really try to scrutinize these with plain language and concise directions. And sometimes I know, we're striving to make sure that we provide this in the most clear language and up to date. Do appreciate the issue of instructions are good today, they're wrong tomorrow. And I think some of that we're just not going to be able to avoid if, depending on when things come out for policy updates and such. But again, to our earlier comments too, is we're trying to also make sure that we have things electronic so that we don't have to change the filing instructions on you. Our hope and our true desire is to have it be 100% electronic, so you don't know where the file is. I mean, to be honest with you, our hope is to have it in a cloud and be able to have, as resources come available, they're just pulling it down and working it, and that you don't need to know that we have to potentially shuffle the files around. Another thing, and we talked a little bit before on this pre-brief, is really leveraging that My USCIS. And I know in the previous administration, it didn't move necessarily as quickly as we'd like it to. We completely acknowledge the 539 has still got some more to go, that there are advancements that need to happen with that. But we've, I think, perfected some of this with allowing attorney representatives and being able to allow, we're working right now on derivatives. So we're going to go back to that 539 and make that better. And we're really investing a lot in the My USCIS, or the customer self-service part of this. So again, hoping that we'll be able to have those RFEs, those additional pieces of information where you can get it directly in that secure mail location in your account, be able to respond back electronically, not having to even worry about physically mailing stuff. And again, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I do think with the last couple of months, and Carrie and Michael can definitely speak to this, but I think through the COVID experience, and I think through our financial issues and having to figure out better and more efficient ways to do things, that we've really jettisoned our way forward on a lot of this. But is it going to happen tomorrow? No. I just really to level set at those expectations, but we're doing this incrementally, and I think rather quickly. We're building on those successes and moving things out. And I think, I'm not sure if I teased it last time, but I'm definitely going to tease it again. But as we start doing the TPS, the Venezuela and Burma and other things that were mentioned by Felicia, we're going to have those be electronic so that you're not having to file paper, and with sheer volumes and making that time frame to get from you filing to an officer as quick as possible. And that's really our roadmap for everything working forward. I jokingly say with my staff, what we want to do is we want to wash, rinse, and repeat. just once we get that success down, let's just keep going. Let's just keep building on it. And we are going to have bumps, and we appreciate your patience as we have bumps, but every one of those bumps will hopefully make it better as we continue to just keep infusing those form types and keep infusing that technology. And I do want to touch, I know Felicia had already said it, but we did go back to not rejecting on the blank spaces policy that came out recently. So I'm hoping that will help as far as of rejection. Then for she also told you a lot of these things have just popped recently. Sorry about that, but also the updating the RFE and the NOID policy. So I think that will also help. It'll give applicants an opportunity. So if it was not necessarily rejected, but if it was for some reason not being considered, they'll have an opportunity to respond with reinstituting some of the RFE policy and NOID policy. But I do want to give others an opportunity to kind of weigh in on that too, if Carrie or Michael.
And you never have to apologize for giving good news that recently happened. So you feel free to do that throughout the entire panel.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I don't have much to add to what Connie said so well, except for to say that, we do, look forward to the day where all of our work comes at the click of send, and so that you don't have to practice overnight mail, you just have to practice clicking submit. And so I scratch my head every time I see the data that shows the number of that would just be parochial, the number of N400s that are submitted online and the number of N400s that are received at the lockbox. So I'm not here to shake my finger about that, but rather to say, if some of the feedback that you've got is helpful for us about why people choose to submit via particular modalities, I think that would be really helpful, because I think we're much more efficient when we have the electrons from the start, and we don't have to deal with the paper. And so it's in our interest, and I hope everyone's interest, for us to be efficient and for us to get that. So, this is probably not the venue to get that feedback, but as you're thinking about feedback, that is something that I'm immensely curious about. And I'll stop with that, because Connie said it all.
Yeah, thank you. No, and I think we'll get to a little bit of that in a little bit in the next section. But in order to finish out this section, in terms of increasing efficiency, I think one recommendation that we had was to eliminate the denials of advanced parole applications due to travel. As you know, the language that was in the I-131 abandoning advanced parole for people who travel has been part of the instructions for a while, but prior to 2017, departures in HRL status didn't trigger that denial. And then without warning, they started to trigger that denial, which creates a need for new applications without a fee for those cases, so more work with no fee, and obviously a lot of other problems that in the interest of time, I won't go into. They're in the document. So any feedback on that?
Okay, so forgive me, this is going to be very scripted, just because there is a lot in here as far as the regs and the Part I and all of that other stuff. So make sure to take notes. So an individual in possession of a valid H or L non-immigrant visa, if required, who is maintaining the non-immigrant status, may travel outside the United States and not abandon a Form 485 application to register permanent resident or adjustment status. If he or she travels outside of the United States during the pendency of the application and upon return to the United States, remains eligible for an H or an L non-immigrant status. But I'm going to say it. However, the instructions for Form 131 application for travel document states, quote, I in parentheticals, you wish to depart the United States before the advanced parole document is issued, your application for advanced parole document will be considered abandoned, end quote. As such, departure from the United States during the pendency of the Form I-131 triggers abandonment of an advanced parole document request unless, underscored, bold, the applicant possesses a previously issued advanced parole document that is valid for the entire period the applicant was abroad. The Form I-131 will not be denied for abandonment if the applicant possesses a valid advanced parole document for the duration of the trip, even if the applicant entered the United States on a non-immigrant visa. The change in denial referenced above was not a change in policy on the Form 131 eligibility requirements, rather resulting from the 2017 implementation of a requirement for service center officers to complete certain system checks for all 131 advanced parole applications prior to adjudications. Before these mandatory system checks, adjudicators were typically unaware of the applicant's travel during the pendency of the Form I-131.
All right.
So unfortunately, with us having to do the checks, if we didn't know, we didn't do anything about it. Now that we have mandatory checks and we know, we have to do it, is what it sums up.
So the takeaway for us is that we have more work to do on getting those instructions changed and those procedures changed so that that doesn't have to happen. So thank you for letting us know that, and we will certainly follow up accordingly. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over quickly the last item of this section because you addressed that they were using and eliminating or expanding waivers for biometrics in certain cases. There's more about that in the barriers document. I appreciate the work you've already done, and we encourage you to do more on that, which is in the document. But because we want to get through more of the agenda, I'm going to pass it along to Suzanne, who's going to now have a series of questions on customer service, contact, and inquiries. Suzanne.
Thank you, Bennett. And I really want to thank all of you here from USCIS. This is such a welcome change, and we're grateful for your willingness to engage and talk to us and consider, you know, our perspective and our concerns, because we know that there's issues on both sides. One issue that has I think really just come about, gosh, I've been doing this too long, in maybe the last 5 to 7 or 8 years, but maybe longer, is the ability of law firm staff, right, to contact and communicate with USCIS. I believe in pretty much every other legal field, law firm staff is allowed to engage with judicial clerks, with what have you. So immigration seems to be a little bit different with that. And I would love if you could speak to that.
Hi, Suzanne. Yes, I will. And Suzanne, thank you to you and Bennett too. I feel like, Suzanne, I met you many, many years ago when I was at the Vermont Service Center. And I feel like maybe we were probably talking about this back then as well. So I will say this. I will say this just in terms of, you know, obviously related to customer service and contact center information. I and my colleagues too, we recognize that I'll call it the business reality for most of you, most law firms or community-based organizations, is that attorneys are not the ones who are typically contacting the agency on behalf of their clients. I will say though, under agency policy, as you all well know, our officers are only permitted to respond to these inquiries if the requester is entitled to receive the requested case-specific information. So as you also know, that's currently defined as the individual listed on the G28. So obviously this presents many challenges for you, which is one of the reasons that you're bringing it up. I also just want to share that it's also very, I'll say, challenging and frustrating for our contact center staff, the immigration services officers at the contact centers who are trying to assist as well. They find it challenging to not be able to communicate with parties like paralegals and other support staff. So I will say we, along, you know, Felicia, this is something we've talked about, and along with my peers, agency leadership is absolutely looking into this. I'll say agreeing to kind of examine the issue and explore what other options might be available, considering both legal and of course privacy impacts. So that is thank you for the recommendation. It is something, you know, that I gave the VSC example, Suzanne, because a million years ago, I used to be an immigration information officer, an IIO at the Vermont Service Center. And at the very beginning of my career, and I can remember back in the day when we would answer phone call after phone call right there at the service centers, way before the contact center time frame, we would have paralegals call who would not have you know, the right, their name was not on the G28. And so we would try to, you know, encourage them to either resubmit a new G28 or let them know that we would have to speak to the actual attorney who's on file. So I'm just sharing that. What I will say, Suzanne, in the interim, we do have other means where I know you're familiar with this, but just to share it with everyone, other means where, you know, obviously customers can make contact with the contact center, like secure messaging that Connie was talking about earlier. That's a great avenue for individual to reach out out through secure messaging, and we can correspond with that person. We can also do it through the online account and live chat. So I'm a big fan of the live chat. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. I do try to really encourage the live chat feature through the contact center, because it does not require the attorney or representative to be waiting for additional information unless there's a callback that needs to happen. And then of course that information would be provided to the customer to put them on notice that they'd be receiving a callback, and we would then verify additional information. So I hear you. It's something that we are looking into, and I tried to just give you a few other options at this time until we can get some agency decision here. But we definitely hear you, and thanks for the suggestion.
Thank you, and I very much appreciate that this is something the agency is considering. I think it's important for all of us. Moving on, in the interest of time, I think one of the hot topics, apparently there's lots of chatter about this in the discussion group right now, is the expansion of premium processing. And just quickly, as I'll say, we talked about this a little bit in the prep. This is two issues. One is expanding the categories, and two is maintaining the level of service. We are very optimistic about my USCIS and that working and being able to communicate in that way. But in the interim, we want to make sure that we're, still getting what we paid for.
Okay, and I'm going to take the stab at this. Some of this is policy, though. Even though the Stabilization Act was passed that authorized us to expand premium processing, there's still rulemaking and things that have to go on to allow us to actually start doing that. And we did expand some. We expand some of the E3 specialties. We were trying to expand the 129Ss, and we're trying to expand some of the I-140s. But if it wasn't already called out in being premium processing, we have to do rulemaking. And we are in the process of making additional rules to ensure that we can expand out those form types, or those class prefs under the form types. I will also say that we're looking to figure out how to push forward on expanding premium processing for 539s and 765s. Again, it's going to take rulemaking and enhancements of our operating systems, because as you well know, you can have a lot of 765s ride with a lot of other form types. I mean, that benefit of having that employment document goes with a lot of different other benefits. So we do have to do some expansions of our systems to ensure it. And then, to be 100% honest and blunt here too, is that with the issues we had with COVID and scheduling biometrics and a use for biometrics, it doesn't do you very much good to submit for premium processing when in actuality we can't move on the case until you have biometrics. So, with the lags that we were having with capturing biometrics, that really wouldn't have afforded you with much of a premium service. So as we are working out these system enhancements and we're coming back to pre-COVID operations, we are looking to bring on those additional classes and form types. And again, as I said before, also having it be electronic, because we don't want you to have to send shuffle papers around and lose precious days with moving paper. As far as the concerns around the processing you paid for, or the services that you paid for, I will say that COVID did cause us some issues as far as in-person services that we might have offered at certain centers. We are coming back to having people in the office and resuming those. We still were providing the services within the 15 days. We have a very low refund rate, but the concern of having the conversations and getting the RFEs, we were using our existing systems. Again, if there were gaps, we'll go back and we'll address those gaps that were brought forward for specific centers. But I do want you to also have on the horizon, which in our pre-conversation we're talking about, I think is a huge benefit, as Carrie's talking about building out my USCIS and having those services for, private secure mailing and different things of that nature. We want to get those up and running instead of the normal way you're getting it through emails now, of putting it in that secure account. And then it opens up to whoever you want to have access to those secure accounts. Being able to provide you those RFEs in your My USCIS profile will allow anybody who you've given access to that profile to be able to use to see that information, share that information, and provide any additional evidence or things that we're asking for. Do we want to do that for all the cases? Yes, but we're going to start this with premium processing. As you've said, Suzanne, you're paying for a premium service. And so we're trying to provide those first to that group. Again, I will also preface with, we're going to have some bumps, so please bear with us. We are having to build out our technology. We are having to really try some new things that haven't been done in the past. So there might be hiccups, and we just want you to bear with us as we're trying to be extremely agile and moving forward with a lot of these enhancements. But our ultimate goal really is to have, as we said before, anybody have access to these My USCIS, have access to these benefits, have access to these accounts, and truly be premium processing for you guys of just getting it faster. Because really, we want everybody to have that technology, and we want to have those cases, as Michael said, in that cloud, ready for any of us to work without having to shuffle around any paperwork. So I hope that answers a little bit and gives a little hope. I know we have work to do.
Absolutely. And we are so looking forward to, I thought the H registration process was, wow, what a difference between that and preparing and filing all those paper cases. The concern is, though, is just as the My USCIS is being built out, to keep up the level of the premium service, because it's not just about being faster, it is about the communication too. And I think that's something people really value. So thank you for considering that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Just moving on, Carrie, you mentioned about callbacks, and if there is a callback, having to speak with the attorney. And that's great, that's fine for now. But it can be really tricky, because if you miss that call, or if, like, say you're on a panel and right now you see that phone number come through and you're like, oh, what do I do? So is there a way to have it scheduled or some way where you don't lose it? You don't miss that opportunity?
Yeah, no, great question. We're working on that. I will say this, Suzanne, to give a little context to it. So I think back in October, I joined EXA in October. So I think that's right. Back in October, we changed our process from escalating inquiries from tier 1 to tier 2. And so previously, you would be placed in an automated voice callback queue. And then every day there were a set number of calls that could be queued based on an officer's availability to take the calls. So as you can imagine, with the resources and capacity, that's a little challenging. And really what happened there is that each day we would have to actually stop the transfers from tier 1. So the contract staff supporting the contact center, we would have to stop those transfers from tier 1, usually around noon Eastern time. And admittedly, that was just disproportionately impacting the West Coast as well. So now what happens, Suzanne, is those inquiries are escalated to a queue, and officers manually call back the applicant or representative, like what you're talking about. And the inquiries escalated to tier 2 will either receive a callback or an email response. So I get that the process isn't perfect and we have to do some work there because of what you're saying. We can take multiple numbers to provide maximum flexibility in contacting, I'll say you, an attorney back. We do call from a 202 area code, so we try to make that well known, because I know, admittedly, a few months back, I think individuals were concerned that they were getting a spam call, they wouldn't answer the call. So when the tier 1 individual informs the caller that they're going to be getting a call back, they also inform them that it's going to be coming from a 202 area code. So we are looking into things like text ahead feature. I know that exists in a number of other capacities, outside of the government, but we are looking at things like text ahead to let someone know when to expect a call, and possibly an option for a scheduled callback. So that is something that we are working towards. There are, of course, like with anything, I'll say system limitations, and it doesn't mean that it happens overnight. So these are some longer term solutions, Suzanne. But that is something that we are looking at, because quite frankly, it of course helps the customer, it helps the attorney, it helps us in the long run as well, because when we're ready to reach out and make that contact, we hope to speak to the individual, and of course they want that as well. So as mentioned before, we also encourage the use of the online account, and that allows the contact center, I'll say, to provide a more substantive response through the secure channel. Hate to kind of keep saying that, but that is a really helpful direction by having that account and can communicate through a secure channel. So I hope that helps a little bit.
No, absolutely. It's helped to understand it, and just so that we're on the same page about how to, because if we're saying only the attorney can talk to the contact center, and then the attorney's on a panel, it doesn't matter how many phone numbers you give, because the attorney's not available.
Right.
Yeah, so thank you. And also, I've really been a huge fan of e-requests from the start, even before, like, I think it was Mary Herman who told me they even existed, and we were like, these are great. And so I'd love to hear about plans to expand e-requests, and also if you could talk a little bit about what happens when you receive the e-request and how the response is processed.
Yep, sure. So agree on Mary Herman. She also educated me on e-requests, I feel like, a number of years ago, and she's wonderful. So yeah, for everyone's benefit, I'll say if you're not familiar with e-requests, it's a great feature that you can find on our webpage it's under the Contact Us feature of the USCIS website. And then of course, under our USCIS tools and resources. Right now, e-request currently has 6 request types. You know them as the outside normal processing time. And then we have a few under non-delivery. So it's like non-delivery of a notice, of a card, of a document. We also have an e-request for an actual accommodations request, and then an e-request for typographical error. So if you're not familiar with that, although I expect most of you are, when you go to the website, those are those 6 areas where you can actually make an e-request. The account for the highest volume, the e-requests account for the highest volume of service requests received annually as part of change of address. So probably no surprise to all of you, change of address is separate. That happens through the change of address online, but that is also a very high volume. So we are considering expanding e-requests to include the request to reschedule biometric appointments. So just wanted to share that with you.
That's
But we don't have plans to expand further right now, and because of some other system priorities. Kind of as I mentioned earlier, we do have some system challenges, but as we're thinking about these things, we recognize kind of where things will be easier for the customers, and of course, easier for all of you. So we are moving forward with expanding access again to the USCIS online account. This allows our applicants and representatives to send inquiries again through that secure messaging. And so that is, I will say, the way forward. More of the future of how they can actually make those requests right through the secure account through USCIS online account. Internally, I'll say we are planning for changes in the way inquiries are escalated to an adjudicating officer for a response to increase efficiency. And then this just helps to ensure, like I'll say, more timely resolution to the inquiry. So I'm trying to remember the second part of your question. I know that the e-requests
the who responds or how the responses are handled.
Yep, perfect. That was what I was going to say. So the e-requests typically go to, I'll say, the office who has the case. So it's typically my colleague Connie Nolan in SCOPS or Michael Valvardi in FOD. So I would certainly defer to them on any like issues, but just for visibility, how it works is the e-request comes in, it's looked at, it goes to the directorate that has the case, so that then that officer sitting at the service center, I'll just say, the officer sitting at the Vermont Service Center that has the file there, looks into the case, gets the information from the case, and responds through the e-request that way. So it is handled at the office that I'll say owns the file, so that you have that, so that it's not more, in case there was sort of the perception out there that a contact center, for example, officer might be responding to an e-request who has no information about the file other than maybe what's electronically provided. It does go to the office that owns the file. So if that answered the last part of your question, and I'm happy if Connie or Michael, if there's anything you want to add in there, but hopefully Suzanne, that gives you kind of a more general understanding of you.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. The last question I have, and then I'm going to turn it back to Bennett, is, we talk about the importance of access and, this ability for callbacks and all these things, but there's a lot of stakeholders outside the US and they don't have access. They can't get callbacks. They can't even get mail sometimes. So how is that going to, what's being done while we're waiting for my USCIS to be expanded to help with that?
Yep. I'll take that one too. So I will say again, our online tools and resources are available 24/7. So that does include like what I was just talking about in terms of the e-request, which allows, you to ask a question about the case status online, change of address, that sort of thing. And this is for outside of the United States as well. So what I'm talking about now is for overseas inquiries. They can also receive information by, calling the 1-800 number. I know we're all familiar with that. And utilize the IVR, the interactive voice response system. We also have the online virtual assistant, Emma, that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. That's available 24/7. And in some cases, Emma will route to a live agent if the question can't be answered through Emma, if during business hours. So I just want to put that caveat out there. Live agent, because of it being a live agent in business hours. Again, you can also, overseas applicants can also send information through a secure message through the USCIS online account. I know you're really going to get sick of me saying that. And finally, on our website, we do have a number available for those calling from overseas. But I would have to get a G28 from each of you in order to release that information. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. It's a 202. It's a 212 number. It's actually on the website. I'll say it now, but I don't want people to worry and feel like they're going to miss it. If you go to our website under contact us, it does give the overseas filing information and how to reach USCIS. It's 212-620-3418 for anybody who wants to have that. But again, it's available on the website. So those are, I'll say, some of the many features that overseas applicants do have, I'll say, at their fingertips, and recognizing that if they need to speak to a live agent, that does have to be in the normal business hours.
Yeah, so all I'll say as follow-up is to consider expanding that somehow, because I think they, I'm right here in New York, but I think they really feel that they're being cut out and that they don't have any access.
Okay.
So I'll just pass that along, and then I'll turn it over to Bennett.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. So we have 5 minutes left, and we have gotten through half of our agenda. So we're not going to get through the other half in 5 minutes. And so I just want to let people know that there's a lot of other issues that will be discussed, hopefully going forward with USCIS and Suzanne and my successors. But for now, I just want to finish with a couple of very important topics. But before I do that, I want to make sure I mention and highlight 3 things that were in our agenda that I want to thank USCIS for, because yesterday, as Felicia mentioned, we had put in our agenda implementing a more reasonable approach to expedite requests. We had put in our agenda expanding adjustment-based EADs to 2 years. And we had put in our agenda changing the ways that RFEs and NOIDs were determined and adjudicated and issued. So all 3 of those things were announced in these new policies just yesterday. And so everything that we don't get to today, obviously, USCIS will announce tomorrow that they're implementing them, so we can all look forward to that. But in the few minutes we have left, because Michael asked about online filings for attorneys, so one of the things that was in this barriers document, and I think that is a barrier to more of the online filings with representation, is that while we wholeheartedly support the intention to move on to online filing for everything, there are some concerns regarding the manner in which the agency has been implementing this change so far. For example, the initial rollout eliminated the attorney from the 539 online filing process, explicitly saying you can only file online if you do not require counsel. Other form types require an electronic handshake, which is cumbersome. And we appreciate the need for privacy, but IRS seems to be able to do this without additional steps. And some of these additional steps seem to foreclose legal representation. So we would ask that we can partner with you to come up with some new ideas to roll out the online filing system to form types that will involve stakeholders and their representatives. And I invite any feedback that you have, because now, Michael, sorry, he asked the question.
I'm just going to quickly jump in, but by all means, any of my colleagues can what I will say quickly is in March, I feel it was in March or April, we held 4 focus group sessions with attorneys and accredited representatives to obtain your feedback about this and your experience with the USCIS online account features and filing online. We get a lot of really good feedback from that and some things that we're working to incorporate. I'll say our team within EXA, but quite frankly, representatives from throughout USCIS have been meeting to discuss how we can address some of this feedback. And I'll say, I kind of call it I call it the G28 handshake between the attorney and the client. For that was kind of an issue that was raised during these focus sessions. So we recognize that we have some work to do there. We're also looking into issues that attorneys and representatives experience when attempting to add a paper filed case to their account. We know that there are some issues there. And so I wanted to let you know those focus groups, we got a lot of really good feedback. We do, kind of like what we said when we opened the session up at the beginning. We're so happy to be engaging with you again. These are just really great opportunities for us to hear what's working and what's not. And when I said we welcome scrutiny, we truly mean that. It does make us better. So always appreciate the feedback. We will be hosting focus group sessions again in the future. And we want to take a look at much of the information that we've already received. I will say, just to kind of put it out there, I was looking at a number here. Since May of 2018 to date, the total number of online accounts created is over 8 million, which includes accredited representative accounts. So we're moving in a good direction. I just wanted to share that number with all of you. But Connie, I don't know if I saw your square light up, so I don't know if you have other things to add. By all means, please feel free.
No, I was just going to build on to that. We've learned a lot. And as we've been rolling out, the students and figuring out how to get the employment based, and then we start rolling out the TPS and getting the attorneys and derivatives, we're going to go back to that 539. I know I said that at the top, but we know we've had to have some of these other wins and successes to go back and to fix that. We understand that is only a partial solution, and we don't want that to be representative of your thoughts on my USCIS. As Carrie also threw out that number of the number of accounts we have, which do include G28 information. We are moving in the right direction. And again, just bear with us. You'll be seeing it sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much. And so the most important thing I can say to wrap up, more than any specific topic we've covered, is just again thanking you all for the opportunity to re-engage with all of you, and the opportunity for AILA to continue to do so. There's obviously a lot of great conversations that were started here today that will be continued after this session. So with that, JJ is here to end our fun.
Thank you, Bennett. Thanks to all our speakers and especially our government speakers. We ask that all attendees complete the evaluation at the end of the session. The session evaluation link is located on the virtual site under each session's description. Your feedback is very valuable for our future conference planning. The CLE code for this session is 4331. Again, the code is 4331. Be sure to check out the exhibitors on the exhibit hall page. Thank you everyone for attending. This concludes the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, Open Forum.